The orbital station Aegis rotated slowly against the black canvas of space, its ring-shaped habitation module mimicking gravity through centrifugal force. Inside Cadet Wing 7's mess hall, the air smelled of recycled oxygen, antiseptic cleaner, and the faintly metallic tang of Threxian protein paste descent kaolin. Vance had learned to hate over 18 months of joint species training. He sat alone. That wasn't unusual. Humans were rare in the Galactic Union's military academies, only 12 in a cohort of 800. And Kaolin, with his close-cropped brown hair, tired gray eyes, and the quiet way he moved, seemed to invite invisibility. He preferred it that way. Invisibility meant survival. Today, however, invisibility failed him. His lunch tray held the only human standard meal served that week, a small container of rice, a pouch of soy sauce, 3 synthetic vegetable rolls, and a vacuum-sealed bar of dark chocolate at a care package from his mother on Earth, smuggled past customs by a sympathetic supply officer. Kaolin had been saving the chocolate for 3 days, unwrapping it only this morning as a reward for passing his 0G combat exam. He had just cracked the soy sauce packet when the shadows fell across his table. 4 Threxians, no 5. Their elongated skulls, chitinous faceplates, and the faint yellow glow of their secondary eyelids marked them as warriors from the Threxian Dominion's elite youth corps. Each stood nearly 7 feet tall, their muscular frames wrapped in cadet grays that strained at the shoulders. The leader, a massive specimen named Vorkal, carried the rank pins of a senior cadet and a reputation for cruelty that had followed him from 3 previous postings. Human, Vorkal said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. Eating alone again? How sad. Kaolin didn't look up. He poured the soy sauce over his rice. I prefer it. We noticed. Vorkal leaned down, his breath reeking of fermented grub meal. The instructors say humans are the galaxy's new apex predators, that your reflexes can outmatch any species. He gestured to his companions. We don't believe them. That's your problem, Kaolin said quietly. For a moment, nothing happened. The mess hall filled with 100 cadets from a dozen species went silent. Even the kitchen drones paused their cleaning cycles. Everyone had seen this before. The Threxians had targeted 3 other humans in the past year. 2 had transferred out. 1 had needed facial reconstruction surgery after a training accident. Vorkal's hand shot out faster than a striking serpent. His claws caught the edge of Kaolin's tray and flipped it upward. Rice, soy sauce, vegetable rolls, and the precious bar of dark chocolate arced through the air in a slow-motion cascade. Kaolin watched the chocolate spin twice before it slapped against the deck plates, shattering into a dozen brown fragments. Soy sauce pooled like black blood around the bullies' boots. The clatter of the tray echoed for 3 full seconds. Then Vorkal laughed. Oops. His 4 companions laughed too. A Hyven cadet at the next table giggled nervously, then stopped when Kaolin's gaze flicked toward her. Kaolin stood up slowly. Not fast, not aggressive, just upright. He looked at the ruined chocolate. His mother had driven 60 miles to buy that brand. She had written, "Proud of you," baby on the wrapper in permanent marker. The wrapper now floated in a puddle of soy sauce. Pick it up, Kaolin said. Vorkal's mandibles spread wide, the Threxian equivalent of a grin. Or what, little ape? You'll cry? Kaolin tilted his head. Behind his gray eyes, something ancient and chemical began to unspool. The human adrenal system, already hyper-evolved compared to most species, had been further augmented by the Academy's secret training protocols. Techniques that converted fear into raw computational combat data. Techniques that the instructors only taught to humans. Techniques that Kaolin had mastered 3 weeks ago. I'll give you one warning, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the mess hall. Run. Vorkul stopped laughing. He looked at his friends, then back at Kalen. The human stood a full foot shorter, weighed half as much, and possessed none of the natural weapons that made Threxians feared across 3 galactic sectors. "You're bluffing," Vorkul said. Kalen smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Count the seconds," he replied, and then he moved. The first strike landed before Vorkul's secondary eyelids fully closed. Kalen didn't punch. He didn't kick. He inserted sliding inside Vorkul's guard, like a knife between ribs. His right hand found the soft cartilage beneath the Threxian's jaw. His left palm slammed into the sternum's neural cluster. His knee, driven upward with the force of a pneumatic piston, shattered Vorkul's left kneecap. 3 points of impact. 3 simultaneous systems failures. Vorkul's eyes went wide confusion, not pain. The Threxian nervous system took 1.2 seconds to register trauma. By the time the agony arrived, Vorkul was already unconscious, his body folding like a collapsed scaffold, his skull bouncing once against the deck plates before lying still in the soy sauce. Time elapsed. 1.4 seconds. The second Threxian, a female named Zero with combat braids woven through her cranial ridges, had just begun to raise her arms when Kalen flowed around her flank. He didn't fight her strength. He borrowed it. His left hand caught her wrist. His right elbow hooked her triceps, and he pivoted, using her own forward momentum to redirect her 7-foot frame into the nearest bulkhead. The impact cracked the reinforced polymer. Zira's carapace split along 3 stress fractures. She slid down the wall, leaving a smear of yellow hemolymph, and did not rise. Time elapsed. 3.1 seconds. The mess hall erupted in chaos. Cadets scrambled over tables. A Kalaran chef bod shrieked and sprayed fire-suppressant foam into the air. But Kalen heard none of it. His world had contracted to a narrow tunnel. Targets, angles, vectors. The adrenal surge protocol burned through his bloodstream like liquid fire, turning seconds into minutes, turning thought into pure action. The third and fourth Threxians attacked together trained partners, experienced killers. They came low and high simultaneously, claws extended, mandibles snapping. A textbook pincer movement that had disemboweled a human marine during the border wars. Kalen dropped, not backward, not to the side. He dropped straight down, his legs folding, his torso compressing, his body becoming smaller than any combat algorithm predicted. The high claw whistled over his scalp. The low claw scraped across his ribs, drawing blood, but not deep. Then he exploded upward. His right leg whipped around in a spinning hook kick that caught the third Threxian across the side of the skull. The impact sounded like a bat hitting an overripe melon. The alien's head snapped sideways, his neck ligaments tearing audibly, and he collapsed into a twitching heap beside the unconscious Vorkul. Time elapsed. 5.7 seconds. The fourth Threxian, young, scared, his mandibles trembling, tried to retreat. Kalen didn't allow it. He stepped into the alien's chest, grabbed his collar with both hands, and drove a rising knee into his solar plexus. The Threxian's breath exploded outward in a wet gasp. His ribs cracked like dry twigs. He folded over Kalen's leg, vomiting bile and blood, and crumpled to the floor. Time elapsed. 7.4 seconds. The fifth Threxian ran. His name was Jaxel. He was the youngest of the group, only 17 standard years old, and he had joined the bullying only because Vorkul threatened to break his mandibles if he refused. Now, as Kalen turned toward him with those terrible gray eyes, Jaxel fled toward the mess hall's emergency airlock. He made it 8 steps. Kalen grabbed a stool, one of the heavy, welded steel models bolted to the deck plates. He didn't unbolt it. He ripped it free, the bolt shearing with a screech of tortured metal. Then he spun, using the stool's mass as a counterweight, and hurled it like a discus. The stool struck Jaxel in the lower back, just above his pelvic girdle. The impact lifted him off his feet and slammed him against the airlock door. He bounced once, twice, then slid to the deck, his legs numb, his vision swimming with stars. Kalen walked toward him. Time elapsed, 9.8 seconds. He stood over the trembling Threxian, breathing hard, his fist still clenched, his knuckles bleeding from where they'd struck chitin. The adrenal surge began to fade, leaving behind a bone-deep ache and a strange, hollow clarity. He looked at the 5 bodies around him, at the blood and hemolymph and soy sauce mixing on the floor, at the terrified cadets pressed against the walls. Jaxel raised a shaking hand. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't." Kalen stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned away. The mess hall's emergency alarms began to blare. They didn't handcuff him. That was the first clue. Kalen sat on a medical gurney in the station's central triage bay, his torn cadet jacket stripped away, his ribs wrapped in synth flesh bandages. 3 medics, 2 human, 1 gelatinous silicoid, worked around him in efficient silence. They cleaned the cuts on his knuckles, injected coagulants into the claw marks along his ribs, and scanned his brain for signs of adrenal burnout. They treated him like a patient, not a prisoner. Outside the triage bay's transparent wall, the corridor teemed with activity. A trauma team rushed past, pushing a floating gurney Vorkal, his neck braced, his skull wrapped in neuroregeneration field emitters. Another gurney followed with the 3rd Threxian, the one whose neck ligaments had torn. A third with Zira, her carapace weeping yellow fluid despite the medic's sealant spray. Kalen counted 5 gurneys. 5 bullies. 4 of them would survive with weeks or months of recovery. 1, the 4th, the one whose ribs had shattered, might never walk without a spinal support brace. The 5th, Jaxel, had already been discharged with minor bruising. Kalen had seen him limping toward the barracks, glancing back once with an expression that wasn't fear but confusion, as if he'd just watched a religious miracle and wasn't sure whether to pray or run. "Cadet Vance." The voice came from the triage bay's entrance. Kalen looked up. Commander Suleiman Murat stood in the doorway, his scarred face unreadable. The commander was a legend in the Galactic Union, a human who had survived the Asteri death swarms, who had single-handedly held the Kessler Line for 48 hours during the Battle of 3 Suns. He was short, bald, and walked with a limp from an old bioweapon infection. He also never smiled. Until today, Marat's lips twitched upward. Just once. Then he jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Walk with me." They didn't go to the brig. They didn't go to the disciplinary office. They went to a sealed observation room overlooking Hangar Bay 7, the restricted section where the Black Ops ships docked. Marat keyed the door, and they stepped inside. The room was small, windowless, except for the one-way glass, and smelled of ozone and burnt metal. A holographic display flickered to life on the far wall. Kalen watched himself move, watched his own body flow through the Threxian bullies like a knife through wet paper, watched the stool rip free from the deck plates, watched his face, captured from 12 different camera angles, utterly blank and calm and terrifying. 9.8 seconds, Marat said quietly. 5 incapacitations. 4 with permanent neurological damage. 1 with a spinal severance that even our regeneration tanks might not fix. He turned to face Kalen. "The Threxian Dominion is demanding your extradition for war crimes." Kalen's throat tightened. "Sir, they attacked me first. The camera footage shows you issuing a warning. Shows you waiting until they initiated physical contact." Marat nodded slowly. "By every regulation in the Union Code, you acted in self-defense. Proportionate response to a lethal threat. Then why am I in here instead of the brig?" Marat touched the display. The footage froze on a frame of Callan's face, those gray eyes, the terrifying calm. Because the Threxian attach watched this footage and asked a very interesting question. He asked why a human cadet, with no combat experience and minimal hand-to-hand training, moved like a Ghost Corps assassin. Callan's blood went cold. The Ghost Corps, the unit that didn't exist. The unit that recruited only from the dying and the damned. The bullies were planted, Morat said flatly. Every one of them. Vorkel is a retired ghost operative. Zyra served 3 tours in the Phalanx Nebula. Even Jaxel, especially Jaxel, is a deep cover infiltration specialist. He paused. The lunch, the humiliation, the isolation, all a test. A test to see if you would break, to see if you would run, to see if you would kill when killing was necessary. Callan stared at the frozen image of his own face. You're saying this was an audition? Marat's smile returned, wider this time. Cadet Vance, you just scored the highest combat evaluation in Ghost Corps history. The selection board watched the footage 3 times. They want you. He pulled a data chip from his pocket and tossed it. Callan caught it automatically. Your orders. Report to Hangar Bay 7 at 0600 tomorrow. Leave your personal effects behind. Tell your mother you love her, because you won't see her for a long time. Callan turned the chip over in his fingers. And if I refuse? Marat's expression didn't change. Then you face a court-martial for excessive force. The Threxian Dominion will push for a dishonorable discharge and 20 years in a penal colony. Your career, your life is over, so I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Marat walked to the door, then paused. The 4th Threxian, the one whose ribs you shattered? He's not going to make it. The spinal damage is worse than we thought. He'll never walk again. Never fight again. He has a mate and 2 hatchlings on Threxos Prime. He looked back at Callan. The Ghost Corps doesn't need heroes, Cadet. It needs people who can live with what they've done. Can you? The door slid shut behind him. Callan stood alone in the observation room, the data chip warm in his palm, the frozen image of his own violence still glowing on the wall. Somewhere in the ICU, a Threxian father lay paralyzed. Somewhere on Earth, his mother was probably washing dishes, unaware that her son had just been recruited into the galaxy's deadliest unit. He thought about the chocolate bar. The wrapper with "Proud of you, baby." The way it had shattered in the soy sauce. Then he closed his fist around the chip and walked out. The ICU smelled like recycled air, antiseptic foam, and the sweet rotten odor of Threxian regeneration fluid. Callan had never been inside an alien intensive care unit before. The beds were larger, designed for species with exoskeletons or multiple limbs. The monitors displayed vitals in unfamiliar spectrum infrared for silicoids, ultrasonic for the blind mycelians, bioelectric for the Threxians. But some things were universal. The soft beep of heart monitors, the hushed voices of medical staff. The weight of mortality pressing down like a physical force. He found the 4th. Threxian in bed 7. The nameplate read Korath. T. Senior Cadet. Threxian Dominion Exchange Program. The body beneath the sheets was a ruin. Ribs had been reconstructed with synthetic bone grafts. The spine, exposed in a shimmering field of micro-repair drones, showed a dark fracture line across the 4th lumbar vertebra. The spinal cord beneath had been crushed, not severed, but compressed so severely that regeneration might take years, if it happened at all. Korath's eyes were open. They tracked Callan as he approached, those yellow secondary eyelids flickering once, twice. You, the Threxian whispered. His mandibles moved weakly, unable to fully articulate the sounds. The human. Callan stopped at the foot of the bed. I'm sorry. Korath tried to laugh. It came out as a wet, rattling cough. Sorry? You shattered my spine in less than a second. You moved so fast I didn't even feel it until I was on the floor. His claws twitched against the sheets, the only part of his lower body that still responded. That's not apology. That's poetry. I didn't know you had a family. Would it have mattered? Kalen didn't answer immediately. He looked at the view screen beside the bed, a small holographic display showing a looping image of two small Threxian hatchlings, their chitons still soft, their mandibles barely formed. They were playing with a ball of string, batting it back and forth, their high-pitched clicks filling the quiet room. Yes, Kalen said finally. It would have mattered. Korath's eyes widened. You hesitated. At the end, when you were running, I saw your wrist screen, the photo of your hatchlings. I hesitated for maybe half a second. If I hadn't, the stool would have hit 2 inches higher. You'd be dead. Silence stretched between them. A medical drone floated past, spraying disinfectant mist. In the next bed, a silicoid patient gurgled softly through its nutrient feed. The Ghost Corps' recruiter came to see me yesterday, Korath said quietly. Commander Marat. He told me the truth, that our fight was a test. That Vorkul knew. Zira knew. Even Jaxel knew. His mandibles trembled. I didn't know. I thought we were just bullying a weakling human. I thought I was proving my strength. His claws curled into fists. Instead, I proved I was a fool. You're not a fool, Kalen said. You followed orders. I followed evil orders. There's a difference. Korath's gaze locked onto Kalen's. Marat said you have a choice. Join the ghosts or face court-martial. He said you came here to make peace with your conscience. His voice dropped to a whisper. Let me save you the trouble. I don't forgive you. I will never forgive you. My hatchlings will grow up watching their father learn to walk again. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. But that's not your burden. Kalen frowned. Then, why did you agree to see me? Korath smiled, a terrible, broken expression on a Threxian face. Because you hesitated. Because you saw the photo and your hand trembled for half a second. In that half second, you proved you're not a monster. He reached out with one trembling claw, and Kalen, after a moment, took it. The chiton was cool and rough against his palm. The Ghost Corps doesn't need monsters, Korath whispered. They need humans who see the line and choose to cross it only when there's no other way. You saw the line. You crossed it anyway. But you saw it. Most don't even look. He released Kellen's hand, let his arm fall back to the bed. Go, sign their contract. Become their weapon. But never stop hesitating. That half second is the only thing separating you from the things you'll have to kill. Kalen stood there for a long moment. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked out of the ICU. The data chip felt heavier in his pocket now. Hangar Bay. 7 wasn't on any official station schematic. Kelen found it by following a maintenance corridor behind the recycling processors. Through a pressure door marked radiation hazard authorized personnel only, and down a spiral staircase that descended 3 decks past abandoned cargo containers and the skeletal remains of an old escape pod. At the bottom, a single blast door stood open, revealing a hangar bay the size of a cathedral. The ships inside were like nothing he'd ever seen. Black angular. Hulls absorbed the dim light. No markings, no registration numbers, no reflective surfaces. They looked like shadows given mass, like holes cut out of reality and filled with weapons. A dozen of them sat in maintenance cradles, their engines cold, their weapon ports sealed. Ghost ships for ghost soldiers. Commander Marat waited beside the nearest vessel, a sleek dart of a ship, barely larger than a shuttle, with cockpit space for 2 and a cargo bay that looked suspiciously like a drop pod launch system. You came, Marat said. No surprise in his voice. Just acknowledgement. You knew I would. I knew you were curious. Marat tapped the ship's hull. This is a Shade-class infiltration vessel. Stealth coating absorbs all known sensor wavelengths. Can operate for 30 days without resupply. Carries enough firepower to level a small city. He smiled thinly. It's yours if you want it. Kalen walked around the ship, running his fingers over the cold, seamless hull. You said the bullies were a test. What was the actual pass-fail criteria? Not freezing. Not fleeing. Not killing unnecessarily. Marat counted on his fingers. You passed all 3. But the real test, the one you didn't know about, was coming here. Visiting Korath. Facing what you did. He nodded toward the ship. The Ghost Corps has killed more people than I can count. We've assassinated generals, destroyed worlds, erased entire species from existence when the Union deemed it necessary. But every operative we've ever lost, they were the ones who stopped feeling, who stopped hesitating, who became the monsters they were sent to kill. He met Kellen's eyes. You felt it. The guilt. The horror. The half-second of doubt. That's not weakness, Cadet. That's the only thing keeping you human. Kalen thought about his mother's chocolate bar. About the way the wrapper had shattered. About Korath's hatchlings playing with a ball of string. What's the first mission? He asked. Marat's grin widened. There's a derelict colony ship, the Aurora's Hope. It drifted into Union space 3 days ago, broadcasting a distress signal. Problem is, the ship was lost 10 years ago during the Xylori outbreak. Every soul aboard should be dead. He pulled up a holographic schematic, a massive vessel, 12 decks, over 1,000 rooms. But the distress signal is still transmitting. And the Xylori hive mind that killed them? It's still there, growing, adapting. You want me to clear it. I want you to lead the mission. Marat tossed him a small metal badge of skull, wrapped in a hood, the Ghost Corps' insignia. Your squad is waiting aboard the Shade. 3 veterans, all non-human. They've been told to follow your orders or die trying. He stepped back. You have 5 minutes to decide. Kalen caught the badge. The metal was warm, as if it had been held by many hands before his. He thought about running about, taking the court-martial, the prison time, the end of his military career. He thought about going home to Earth, to his mother's kitchen, to a life without violence or adrenaline, or the terrible clarity of combat. Then he thought about the Aurora's Hope. 1,000 souls, dead or worse. A hive mind that had survived a decade without food, without new hosts, without anything except the cold patience of a predator waiting for prey. He pinned the badge to his collar. 4 minutes, he said. I need to check the weapons locker. Marat laughed, a genuine surprised laugh that echoed off the hangar bay's distant walls. You're going to fit in just fine, Cadet. The Aurora's Hope had been beautiful once. Now it was a tomb. Kalen drifted through the zero-G corridors, his magnetic boots clicking against the deck plates every third step, his helmet lights cutting through clouds of frozen organic mist. The Xylori bioweapon didn't just kill, it converted. Walls were coated in fibrous growths that pulsed with a sickly blue bioluminescence. Bodies, human bodies, Threxian bodies. A dozen other species hung suspended in the air, their flesh partially dissolved, their bones repurposed into structural supports for the hive dock behind him. His squad moved in perfect silence, 3 figures in matching black stealth armor, their faces hidden behind featureless visors. The squad leader, a hulking Threxian named Vex, carried a plasma cutter and a grim sense of humor. The second, a lysilicoid designated Shard, flowed through the corridors like liquid glass, her crystalline body refracting the helmet lights into rainbow patterns. The third, a small, bird-like raptori named Kalis, floated near the ceiling, her multi-spectrum eyes scanning for heat signatures and bioelectric activity. They had been together for less than an hour. They already moved like a single organism. Contact. Cadet whispered over the squad channel. Deck 7, Section 12. Multiple heat blooms. They're moving this way. Kalen held up a fist. The squad froze. He'd studied the Xylari hive mind during the transit. The bioweapon had been designed by a rogue Asteri geneticist, plague that overrode host nervous systems and networked them into a collective intelligence. Individual infected were slow, mindless, easily killed. But together, guided by a central hive node, they became something far more dangerous. A distributed predator that learned from every engagement. The trick, the Ghost Corps' briefing had said, was to kill the node. Without it, the infected reverted to animal instinct and could be cleared room by room. The problem, the node could be anywhere. And it was smart enough to hide. Shard, Kalen said quietly. Can you feel the vibration patterns? The node will be generating more bioelectric noise than the others. The silicoid tilted her crystalline head. A faint hum escaped her body, her version of echolocation. Yes, Deck 10. Main engineering. The node is feeding. Kalen didn't ask what it was feeding on. He didn't want to know. They dropped down 3 decks through an emergency shaft, bypassing the infected clusters that shambled through the upper levels. The air grew thicker, warmer, more organic. By the time they reached Deck 10, Kalen could hear the wet sounds of consumption, tearing, crunching. The low moans of something that had once been human, but was now just meat. The engineering bay doors were sealed. Vex placed a breaching charge. Kalen counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The explosion sent fragments of metal spinning through the zero-G air. Kalen was through the breach before the debris finished expanding, his plasma rifle up, his targeting reticle painting threats in red. The engineering bay had become a nursery. Hundreds of infected, not infected. Hatchlings, small 4-limbed creatures with too many eyes and too many teeth, crawling over the remains of the ship's reactor core. They had been gestating in the warmth of the radiation, feeding on the decaying bodies of the crew, growing into something that would eventually tear through the hull and spread to the nearest inhabited world. And in the center of the chamber, suspended from the ceiling by organic cables, was the node. It had once been a human woman. Kalen could see the remnants of her captain's uniform, her hair still braided, her fingernails still painted a faded pink. But her body had been hollowed out, her skull cracked open, her brain stem extended into a pulsating mass of neural tissue that connected her to every infected on the ship. Her eyes opened. They were blue, human blue, and they focused on Kalen with terrible intelligence. Help me, she whispered. Not overcomes, directly into his mind. The hive mind's voice. Please, it hurts. It's been hurting for 10 years. Kalen's finger hovered over the trigger. His squad waited. Vex's plasma cutter glowed. Shard's crystalline body sharpened into blade-like edges. Kalis' eyes tracked every hatchling in the room. Help me, the node whispered again. Kill the hive. Kill me, please. Kalen remembered Korath's words. Never stop hesitating. He hesitated now. A full second. 2. Then he fired. The plasma bolt took the node in the center of its neural mass. The woman's body convulsed, her mouth opening in a silent scream, and then, blessedly, she went still. The organic cables went dark. The hatchlings froze, their connection severed, their tiny minds collapsing into chaos. Now, Talon said. The squad moved. Plasma fire lit the engineering bay like a sunrise. Shard spun through the hatchlings, her crystalline blades severing limbs and heads. Vex's cutter turned into a whirling arc of death. Kalis rained sonic pulses from above, bursting the creatures like overripe fruit. Kalen fought through the carnage, not to kill, but to reach the reactor core. The radiation levels were climbing. The hatchlings had been damaging the containment field. In minutes, the core would melt down, taking the ship and everything within 1,000 kilometers with it. He found the emergency shutdown switch behind a panel of melted plastic. He slammed his palm against it. The reactor hummed, groaned, and went dark. Silence. Kalen stood in the sudden stillness, his armor smoking, his hands shaking, his breath fogging his visor. Around him, the engineering bay was a charnel house. Dead hatchlings floated in the zero-G air like grotesque balloons. The node's body hung limp, finally at rest. "Squad report," he said. "Vex here. 3 minor lacerations. Still combat effective. Shard. Minor crystalline fracture. Functioning at 92%. Calice. Uninjured." A pause. That was impressive, Cadet. For a human. Kalen almost laughed. Almost. Then he looked at the note again, at the woman's blue eyes. Still open, still staring at nothing. "Let's get out of here," he said quietly. Mission complete. 3 months later, Cadet Kalen Vance walked into the mess hall of the orbital station. Aegis for the first time since the incident. The room fell silent. He'd expected that. News traveled fast in the Galactic Union, especially news about a human who had single-handedly incapacitated 5 Threxian Special Forces operatives, cleared a derelict colony ship of a xylari hive mind, and been promoted to Ghost Corps operative with the fastest commendation in history. His face had been on every news feed for a week. His name had become a verb in Threxian slang. To pull a Vance meant to win a fight so decisively that the enemy never recovered. What he hadn't expected was the new batch of cadets. They sat at the long tables, fresh-faced and nervous, representing a dozen species. Kalen spotted a group of young Threxians near the window, their chitons still glossy, their mandibles still learning the right shapes for standard speech. One of them, a nervous-looking male with a scar across his left eye, was carrying a tray of food. He was walking directly toward Kalen's usual table. The room held its breath. Kalen saw the moment the young Threxian recognized him. The scarred eye widened. The mandibles trembled. The tray in his hands wobbled dangerously. And a cup of blue liquid, some kind of raptori energy. Drink sloshed over the rim and splattered across the floor near Kalen's boots. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Even the kitchen drones stopped moving. The young Threxian turned pale beneath his chiton. "Hi, Cadet Vance. I didn't mean. I'm so sorry." Kalen looked at the spilled drink, then at the terrified cadet, then around the room at the frozen faces, the wide eyes, the fingers hovering over emergency call buttons. He remembered his own lunch. The soy sauce, the chocolate bar, the way Vorkal had laughed. He stood up. The young Threxian flinched. A Kaloran cadet dropped her fork. Somewhere behind him, Kalen heard Vex's low chuckle over the squad channel. The Threxian operative had insisted on accompanying him to the mess hall. Just for the entertainment value. Ian walked to the young cadet. He knelt down. He pulled a cloth from his pocket, standard issue. Nothing special, and carefully, deliberately, wiped up the spilled drink. Then he looked up at the terrified alien and smiled. "Don't worry," Kalen said softly. "Lunch is just lunch." The young Threxian stared at him for a long, frozen moment. Then, slowly, hesitantly, he laughed. It was a shaky sound, nervous and relieved, but it was real. Around the mess hall, other cadets began to exhale. A conversation started somewhere in the back. A raptori whistled a joke. The tension shattered like glass. Kalen stood, clapped the young Threxian on the shoulder, and carried his own tray to an empty table in the corner. He ate alone. He always ate alone. But this time, the empty chairs around him didn't feel like a warning. They felt like a choice, a space he had cleared for himself. Not out of fear, but out of peace. Across the station, in the Galactic Union's central military database, Kalen Vance's personnel file had been updated. His rank, Ghost Corps operative. His specialization, solo infiltration and high-value elimination. His reputation score, maximum dot, but the last line of the file, the one only commanders could see, read simply, subject demonstrates controlled hesitation reflex. Emotional anchor intact. Risk of ethical drift, minimal. Recommendation, continue active deployment. Classification, unbroken. Kalen finished his meal, crumpled his napkin, and glanced at the view screen on the mess hall wall. A news alert scrolled past. Xylari remnants detected on Fringe World, Ghost Corps deployed. He stood up. Vex, Shard, and Kalis were already waiting by the exit, their armor polished, their weapons loaded. Vex tossed him a data chip. New orders, boss, the Threxian said. Seems the galaxy isn't done needing saving. Kalen caught the chip, slipped it into his pocket, and walked toward the hangar bay dot behind him. The young Threxian cadet watched him go. Then he picked up his tray, walked to his own table, and sat down among friends who would never know. How close they had come to disaster. The legend of the human who spilled 5 bullies in 10 seconds grew a little more that day. But the truth, the quiet truth that Kalen carried in his chest, beside his mother's last chocolate wrapper and the memory of a paralyzed alien's forgiveness, was simpler. He wasn't a legend. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who had learned that hesitation wasn't weakness, It was the only thing keeping him human.